What's up, Scotty Games here with the Knights of the Square Tablet podcast, and today we are interviewing a developer from the game Kinstrife, which is a physics-based medieval RPG developed by a two-man studio named Finitude. And in this interview, we kind of go in depth about the combat system more, since we're all a bunch of Shiv players. We're more interested in that sometimes, but I wish that we had more time to go into the RPG element, but I'm very excited about this game, and if you want to find more information, please check the description below. Wishlisted on Steam if you like what you see. And without further ado, I bring you Kinstrife.
Welcome to episode 2 of Season 2, Knights of the Square Tablet. Your host, Stride of the Champ, here, as usual, with Coach Soder Dave. Welcome, Mr. Dave.
Hello, hello.
And we welcome back a man who cannot be defeated by a sword, but he can be defeated by a microphone, Scotty Games. Welcome back,
Nice.
brother. Glad we got you up and functioning. And we're super excited because we got some developers on, which are always our favorite cast to do. Chris, welcome. Welcome to the stream. We're so happy to have you on here to talk about your game. It's called Kinstrife, and I'm going to let you take over from here and tell us what it's about.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. Super excited to do that. And first time for me, to be on video like that. So yeah, hope I don't fumble every 5 seconds.
Coach fumbles all the time, so we'll be good to go.
Right. So Kinstrife is a historical, non-linear role-playing game with physics-based combat. And what that means is that you will be playing as a wandering knight in medieval 13th century Germany, where you will be building up your retinue of loyal followers, all while you're, of course, fighting in battles, doing missions, contracts among the nobles, the noble houses, the lords of the time. It was an era kind of like set in a civil war. So yeah, you're set out to gain riches, fame, everything that you set out to essentially as you gain your reputation, better gear, you improve your skills, but also you have more and more followers doing bigger, more important parts in the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting how this cast happened. Actually, it's a good story. So the TikTok algorithm is absolutely amazing. So I guess the algorithm knows anything with knights I'm going to be interested in. And I got a TikTok of the first video I guess they posted up on their TikTok account. I'll probably play it right now, of a bunch of knights fighting. I was like, oh my God, I'm like, I gotta click. I'm sold. And I saw that they were following me already, and I was like, okay. I was like, I'm gonna YOLO out a message here and see what happens. And here we are on the cast. So we're excited to make it happen.
Sure, yeah.
You guys are a team of 2, correct?
Yeah, that is true.
And I think this is a good segue into you guys, because I'm highly interested in this. I think we probably share a similar taste in games, but
I think so too.
It says you guys started off as Mount and Blade modders.
Yeah, back in the day, and that was not Warband, but original Mount and Blade. So like before 2010, actually, before we actually really knew, or at least speaking about myself here, before I really knew what I was doing, I was messing around with files in Mount and Blade, which was great for that because, you had all the files right there. You could modify the textures and so on. So then we met up, and, the forums, the Mount and Blade forums were great at the time. Really cool community back then. And, at some point we were, we started chatting about mods and stuff, and decided, it totally must be cool to make our own games, right? So he said, let's just do it. And I think the good part is that back then we had no idea just how much work it is to make a game, that we just set out to it, got our feet wet.
I read on your website that this is your guys' first foray into making games, right? Or like you've been modding, but you're learning as you go, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Learning ever since. Yeah. So I mean, as you can imagine, it took us quite a while, to just get the hang of the basics, because back then when we started out, we couldn't even really program. So we had to learn from scratch. So I mostly did 3D modeling, 3D graphics, and Khaya, especially did animations, which maybe kind of still are our focus areas to this day. But we really had to figure out everything. Yeah, that's also where I would say the first couple of years kind of went, just learning, trying out things, how to even, just get the most basic features in.
How did you land on making a massive medieval RPG as the first game?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of like a running joke in game development circles that everybody, when you get the idea that, hey, I can actually make games myself, you start out like with the biggest idea ever. Like it's kind of like a meme when someone went on like a game dev forum and said, yeah, I want to make a scientifically accurate dragon MMO, something like of that sort, which is just huge. So we were actually dumb enough to stick with that for all those years. Well, maybe not dumb, but persistent enough to stick with it all these years, to the point where we actually started to know what we were doing. And over the years we started getting some promising results, especially with physics-based combat. And basically it's mostly a story of not having given up ever since.
No, that's the most important thing I think people can do to stuff is show up, right? That's always step one. Yeah. And how long have you guys been working on the game now?
More than 10 years. So, like I said, we started like around 2010. We started chatting up about the idea of a game, and so I would say you can. By the way, you can still find videos of that on YouTube. I think we had our first physics-based combat demo stages of gameplay ready at maybe 2015, I think it was, when we did our first builds. When, by the way, we kind of had like a prehistorical, well, not prehistorical, but like antiquity, Celtic setting. And then at some point we decided, you know what, maybe we should do medieval again. It's a bit broader appeal there, bit more of a range of armor as well. And then the years went by. We slowly but steadily improved the game. 2018 we had a bit of a tech release, a tech demo, which you can now get, just to try for yourself on our Discord if you feel inclined. But that was from 2018 on. And we have improved it ever since and essentially rebuilt it from scratch.
Before we get into the combat, I wanted to ask them a few questions.
For sure.
Go for it, Dave.
So, how long have you been working on the game as opposed to like that early stage where you were just kind of, understanding what you actually had to do?
So, I would say it was like a gradual progress of figuring out things, doing some things, then coming back to them like 2 years later, figuring out they're not up to standard anymore, doing them again, as sort of like, I don't know, like replacing every bit again and again, where I would say in 2018, we got to a point where we really had the foundations for what we are seeing or working on now. So I would say for the current iteration, 5 years-ish.
Wow. Okay. How would you guys say that you've divided responsibilities? And are there any things that you've kind of like left untouched for potentially extra help when that eventually comes? Or do you plan to just do 2 dudes until it gets done? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, so I mean, as an indie developer, you always have to essentially do everything, and we do definitely split the responsibilities. We definitely have areas that one person likes to work more on. So I would say Khaya, as he did when he started out, he's really into animation and tech animation, so that's really his jam to make sure that the controls are there. Which is, of course, a really big part of any combat game, right? The locomotion as, just the base layer, but then, of course, also the controls for the attacks, making sure that works out well, especially because I think we have a pretty unique system there. So yeah, also a lot of development and iterations went into that. And also a lot of the tech stuff. So something, for example, he did some time ago was create kind of a new UI framework for Unity for their new UI system, which
the
was
game's on Unity?
Yeah, it's on Unity, exactly.
Okay.
So a lot of tech background stuff that you have to do if you want to build a game of any more ambitious size that isn't pure spaghetti code. So yeah.
Okay. So now I think I'll ask you about the combat, right? Because that's my job here today. Now I know that you guys mainly played Bannerlord, is that right? And that was probably a big inspiration for you guys when making the game.
Yep. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you can say what you wanted to say.
Yeah. So to be honest, we haven't actually played Bannerlord that much, like especially in contrast to the previous Mountain Blade titles, because that's kind of like what we spend our, in my case, teenage years and also kind of like early 20s in. Like, I don't know how many hundreds of hours I have in Mountain Blade, like the original Warband. So I would say that's kind of like the foundation layer. And then there were actually a lot of games that we're inspired by as well that, kind of add to this. One big thing I would like to mention here is a game called Exanima, which has physics-based combat. Yeah, and so that was super cool, and I think it also played a big role in kind of convincing and showing us that that is a thing that is feasible and that is fun and can be very rewarding. So that was a big one. I would actually say I probably have played more hours Exanima than I have played Bannerlord. I will be very honest here. I'm not sure if that look by Dave is good.
Bannerlord didn't capture the same magic to me as the original. I was a day one purchase of the original game from the old Tale Worlds website before even the mods and everything.
Exactly.
And that game just had something special about it.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, it was the same thing for me with Bannerlord. Like, tried it, but maybe it's an age thing. I think I played the original Man Blade back when I was 14 for the first time, and basically anything that is new and fresh like that when you're 14, it just like blows your mind, right? That didn't happen with me with Bannerlord anymore. So yeah.
Okay, so go ahead, Scott.
I was just gonna ask, like, the influence with because you guys are kind of comparing it to Mountain Blade, and I was looking at the trailer, and it didn't obviously there's not like every detail about the game, but it didn't really seem like there was a commanding units. It feels more like you're a dude in the battle, and you go through the game in an RPG, and maybe you create the conflicts that happen along with just hiring like you don't actually command the units.
I was about to go over those aspects. So when it comes to medieval games, I see mainly two different types of people and two different types of gameplay. There's the micro-focused gameplay where it's really heavily focused on your individual mechanical skill and the combat system.
Yep.
And then there's the macro, which is like organize your troops into specific formations. How do you strategize these battles? How do you approach that type of stuff? So I'm kind of just curious, like, are you guys trying to get both of those or one of those, or maybe more on one side than the other, or like a perfect balance? Like what's your guys' deal?
So I'd say, especially in the beginning, we're definitely veering more towards the smaller scale, individual skill for sure as well. Because I mean, with physics-based combat, it's just something that we really want to put into the hands of players and say, just have fun with it, enjoy it, experiment, play around, and that's definitely a big thing. And of course, making sure that the control when you play as an individual, that just feels really smooth and is fun to play as. That's something we iterate and go over a lot. So I would say that really is what we see as the foundation. And then again, also something that Scotty has said is that what is very important for us, and maybe what sets us kind of apart from Bannerlord, is that indeed you always stay in this close-up perspective. You always stay in control of your character. And what we want to go for with that is that we have this very immersive and grounded gameplay experience where you never really basically zoom out to something that we always felt was kind of like impersonal, that kind of like takes you out of things. So that is something that we're doing. So talking about this, if you kind of want to divide it up into like this campaign aspect where you have kind of like this longer term meta gameplay, as well as the strategy gameplay, that's going to be the case in both, where you remain in your character.
To me, I like that because I come from mainly like Chivalry gameplay. I'm actually not too much of a fan of the Mountain Blade stuff. I don't think it's bad, but I'm a very big fan of the one-man army type deal, Like, if I'm good enough, there's nothing that can beat me. But I know that a lot of other people who value the realism and, the simulation aspect of the battles, they don't like that. Or they don't like it as much. Some people have, like, limits of what they're willing to put up with. And if they see a guy that just slays, like, 10 dudes in 5 seconds, that might just be too much for them. It breaks their immersion. So I don't know exactly. I don't know what the right answer is to that, but I just know that with what you said, I'm happy, so I don't care.
What type of scale are we going to get with like the fights? A lot of the early stuff you guys posted was very focused on like the 1v1, the duels, and then in the end of your most recent trailer, we saw a sick battle with like 20 people bumping into each other that looked absolutely chaotic. It's obviously still smaller scale than Mountain Blade, but what are we going to be looking at as far as the fights? Like, what's going to be the main focus? Is it more dueling or more group fight oriented?
I would say we shoot for a really interesting mix where even into the late game it makes sense to have smaller scale combat, to have duels in context, for example, when you have tournaments or other types where you would have duels in medieval times. But also basically having just a lot of variety in what you can do. Smaller scale skirmishes definitely will still be a thing. So, what we're hoping or planning to do. So part of the strategy campaign aspects will be, for example, that you have to think ahead. If you have to travel quickly, then you will be traveling with a smaller retinue, with a smaller team, essentially, right? Because you just have to move less stuff. But that would mean that you would get more into like a skirmish situation, ambush situation, that type of stuff. And larger battles is definitely something that we are also hyped for. That's also why we kind of have been showing it in the trailer.
That scene was sick.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I mean, I have to say props to Khaya there. So I can say, thank you, saying that really with a big smile, because we really had crunch time with the trailer, getting it out in the shape that we wanted to, and Khaya really got the setup there because we did a bunch of improvements to the procedural generation of the characters to make them look varied and interesting. To also get the formations to work better, because of course there are a lot of additional challenges when you get to size like that. So, and maybe to answer the scale. So besides the variety, I think it is realistic that we get to maybe like 50 versus 50 to 100 versus 100. So we have been doing stress tests where we have, I would say, about 100 physically simulated characters, and that runs fine at 60 FPS. So of course, then you still have the whole environment and additional calculations that come on top of that. But then again, we are of course continue to optimize as well. So I think that is roughly the range that we're looking at.
We've said it a few times. Could you explain what physics-based combat actually is?
Right. Yeah. So a lot of games are saying that they're doing physics-based combat. For example, Mountain Blade says it has physics-based combat, but that is not what we mean when we say physics-based combat. So I've mentioned Xanima. and that comes close. There's another game called Half Sword, which recently has some making rounds.
I was just gonna bring that up. Have you guys played that goofy game? Physics-based combat seems hard to make, so it's like I was wondering, like, is it gonna be a little goofier or is it gonna be more serious? But sorry to interrupt. Go on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Actually, it's a great point. It is hard to make. And before I answer that, I will maybe very briefly go into what it actually is. So the vast majority of games, they have animations where basically only have information. Where is, for example, the hand in this frame, then the next frame, the next frame, and so on. So you only have like the position and the time. What you don't have is the forces that have to act on the individual body parts, that you have kind of like on the joints, what sort of like torque, which sort of force is being enacted by the muscles to get that movement going. Which means that it is very hard for most games to interact with the world in a realistic and convincing way if basically you just have like this movement data. And so what if there is a collision? You can't really figure out and make the character respond in a good way if you just have this type of motion. So what physics-based combat is and does is we try to get all of this motion, all of this movement by applying forces and torque to the character skeleton. So essentially the thing that makes those in-game characters move. And that is hard. And a very closely related field is robotics. So I'm not sure if you guys have maybe watched like those Boston Dynamics videos where they show off robots, and it's super impressive, the stuff that they actually do. And that is actually a very closely related problem. They essentially have the same thing, that they have like a target trajectory of how those robots should move. And then they have to make a very good informed decision about how much torque are they applying to the individual limbs in that moment. And that's more or less what we're doing with physics-based combat.
So allow me to conceptualize this. When a person swings their sword, right? In your typical game, like Chivalry, you might have the wind-up and the release phase. The second it enters release phase, it just is doing damage. And when it's in wind-up, it isn't doing damage. So there is no torque or force applied to that. It's simply just on or off damage. In your game, you're going to have it to where in different parts of the animation, and maybe even depending on the direction, certain force may be applied. So in the very beginning portion, it'll be a very little amount of damage because there wasn't a lot of time for that to actually move and gain momentum. And then near, like, let's say, I don't know, the peak of the animation, like the halfway point where he's like actually swinging it in the air, it might do the most damage. And then near the end of that animation, it'll do a lower damage again. Like, how do you determine where the most damage is and the least damage is in that animation?
So that is actually something. So what is cool about physics-based combat is that in addition to information, maybe like the phase of the attack, which is, by the way, something how I think Mount & Blade handles its kind of like attack scanning. I think that's what it does, kind of like attack phase-based, and has some factor like a curve attached to it. But something that we're doing for a start, we can do it velocity-based, right? So I think Mount & Blade is also doing that. So when you're sitting on a horse, you're riding by, you're doing more damage. But what we then also do on top is that we also know at the contact how much force is acting at the point of contact, which is also a very important consideration coming to that. So, if you're interested in any sort of martial arts, so something that is like a basic concept is that, you put, like if you really have punches that connect is when you kind of put your weight into it, when you have your body, basically the punches coming from your feet, and basically it connects to the hand. And that is because the damage is especially about the kinetic energy and then in the force that you continue to put basically into the contact. And that is something that we are able and can factor into the damage calculations with physics-based combat.
So
you
even
also
based
calculate
on your movement, you can do different types of damage depending on the direction you're moving, depending on the direction that your camera's twisting.
Yeah, that's actually something of the controls that is very difficult, right? That we, have to have basically continuous movement with your mouse along with continuous camera movement. So that's something where I think we have found a good solution, but we continue to iterate on that and improve that.
Are you also like using weight or like factors like that is also calculating damage? So
absolutely,
you know,
100%.
something's heavier. And then like how, like when you move your mouse, the quicker you move your mouse, the more momentum you're gonna get. So does that all? That's also playing a factor, right? Like all these, and then maybe the speed that you can swing is based on your weapon's weight and all that. Okay, that's
okay.
cool.
So if we're to count everything, if we're to count all these factors, it's the direction that you're moving. So if you're moving away from a swing, like backing up while swinging forward, that'll reduce your damage.
Yep.
Because you're taking away from the impact. So if you're moving into your swing, that'll increase your damage. If you're twisting into the direction that you're swinging, it'll increase your damage. If you're moving on a horseback, then the velocity will be added to your damage. And then on top of that, the type of attack that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different factors.
Oh, and the weapon as well, right? So something that Scott has mentioned with the weight, that is the thing, and something that is actually very important in the handling of weapons and also kind of like the type of damage they do is the distribution of the weight. So basically where the center of mass is on the weapon. So something that you have with swords. They are very nimble, they're very nice to move around, and that is because their center of mass is very close to the grip, very close to the crossguard. So they are not very percussive as, for example, a hammer is, where the center of mass is very, close to the head, where you will be hitting. So that means you really have all that mass behind the impact, which in turn means, though, it is more sluggish and harder to move around. And that's something that stems exactly from this physics-based approach, is that when you're moving around, you also have to basically exert more force. So when you have a hammer like this that is really unwieldy, and what you would also expect from real life, it also feels unwieldy in the game.
What type of combat mechanics are there for defense? Like, how are you doing defense? Something like Chivalry has blocks and counters and 3 types of attacks. Something like Mountain Blade, way different. You have directional blocking. What are you guys doing?
So also the combat are physics-based. I feel like I'm throwing around physics-based too much, but a lot of the combat gameplay just stems from that. So there are basically 2 types of defending. One is with shields, the other is with your weapon, where you're kind of more parrying. Well, maybe to differentiate that even further, you kind of have like where you just try to block, and then where you have parrying, where you kind of like try to move basically the attack away, kind of like not
chambers,
soaking up the energy.
Oh, I see.
That as well, yeah. So you're kind of like trying to not really soak it all up, but instead like move it sideways. And that is because so the collisions between the weapons, we also have those working continuously. So if you catch an attack with your sword, and it doesn't matter for us, it doesn't matter if mechanically you are currently doing an attack or whether you're blocking, whether you're doing something else. If your sword is kind of like swinging in a direction, positioned in a direction where you will deflect the attack, it's going to deflect the attack. The sword is going to be in the way.
So now both of our attacks and defense will all be done with the mouse?
Yes.
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit of a game of developing how to finally move your mouse to move up the sword for defense, and then using quicker motions to take out actual strikes.
Exactly, and kind of also maybe strategizing a little bit even to maybe set up a good attack. So you can also position your weapon kind of continuously, basically your guard essentially, where you want your weapon to be. So you can kind of like move in and kind of have like a more threatening thing overhead where you can like quickly strike, stuff like that.
Like the Kingdom of Heaven movie, take the high guard.
Yeah, Khaya actually is a big fan, and it's funny you mentioned that scene because I think that is one of the things that has really inspired us, but especially him, to have this system where you can like fluently like change between guards that you basically base your attacks off.
How long are you looking for fights to be? Individuals, like in a 1v1, and then obviously how long are you looking for battles to be?
That's a tough one. So I would say, in a kind of like symmetrical fight. So I haven't touched that yet, but something that, for example, plays a big role is whether you have armor or not. But so in a symmetrical kind of fight between two armored opponents, that I think, like a fight could be like a minute, something like that. Actually, it can be really drawn out because you like what some other historical fighting games do. For example, there's a game called Hellish Court, which is more of like a historical fighting game where you also have like the side view. Where it is more like the SEMA style. If you hit once, then the duel's over if you're not armored. But with armor, it can definitely drag on a bit more. Well, not drag on. The fights last longer because a hit isn't, necessarily, or especially not likely going to end the fight right away.
A big complaint with something like Shiv 2 is that the battles last 30 seconds and the duels last 3 minutes. And a lot of people get mad at that. I don't know if it's necessarily a problem, but I was just curious what you guys would want, your fights to be like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a big question of, just how are the fights kind of like set up, in which context are doing them. So I think in a fast-paced multiplayer game, as Chivalry is, I think 3 minutes are a lot of time, right? You want to keep going essentially, whereas with our game, we're definitely focused on single player. 3 minutes, if you have an intense fight that lasts 3 minutes and then you come out on top, that is amazing for a single player game. If you manage to do that in a way where it doesn't feel like it's just like a sludge fest and then it's dragging on. So that's kind of our main consideration. We want the fights to be in a length where, it is fun and enjoyable. It doesn't drag on. It's not a slugfest.
Okay.
How many weapons can we expect to be hitting people over the skull with?
All right. So maybe do me like let me do like a brief roundup, quick tally in my head. So we have a bunch of spears and like 3, maybe like 2 or 3 types of mace, maybe 4, like 7. Bunch of swords, falchions, axes. I don't know. I would say like 15 melee weapons.
Do you have a flail? Just say yes or no.
This is
Flails.
close to our heart over
you
here.
You can't say physics-based like 20 times and then not say flail.
I know. And here's the thing. We do physics-based combat, but we are also a historical game, and flails weren't a thing until like 200 years later.
I had a fight with my chat about this the other night. Yeah, they weren't really. They were like more either ceremonial pieces or like, just like maybe used in gladiator times or something, just for show. They were never practical in battle, but a flail would be cool though. We still want it, but.
It would be cool, and here's maybe like another cool thing to mention about the game here is that starting out as modders, we really build up a game with modding in mind, which means that when people want to add in a flail, we will make it very easy for people to add in flails.
Great.
So
do you have a mace with no flange or spikes?
You mean kind of like a club, kind of like with like a round head, something like that?
It's literally like it looks like a morning star, except remove all the spikes and you only have a ball.
Yeah. Do we have? Let me think right now. I don't think we have one of those. I think we just have one like with a spike, so we can also stab with it.
A golden dog.
We also have a golden dog. Yeah. We also have one of those actually. Those are kind of like more like a two-handed type of thing, right?
For some unrelated reasons, we're really pissed about the golden dog. So.
Yeah. I can imagine. It's nasty.
So you touched on historical accuracy. So the game is historically accurate. How did you land on 13th century Germany?
Right. So I think I mentioned previously that we kind of skipped through the ages a bit, and we land on this particular setting for a couple of reasons. So both historical reasons as well as kind of more game design reasons, I would say. And I think the historical reasons are definitely also to a big part, just personal preference. But to me, kind of like middle 13th century, like with those great helmets, but you still have like those surcos and that mail armor. To me, that is like the stereotypical medieval knight, kind of. And I know for a lot of people that is, knights in full plate armor. You get that a lot. But I also felt that there aren't actually that many games that really do like pre-plate armor medieval stuff that much. So I think that was a reason. And the other reason was that historically the setting where the game is at, it's kind of like a time of civil war in basically back in medieval Germany. It was a time where there was basically no emperor because of kind of like a nice little thing that was pulled off by the king of Bohemia. So the way it worked is that the emperors were actually voted in medieval Germany by the 7 most powerful nobles of the Imperium. And the king of Bohemia was kind of like the one who would have tipped the scales in voting. He was the last one to vote, the 7th person. And he actually wanted to be king himself, but he was not one of the candidates. So he took bribe money from both sides and said, "You know what? I'm voting for both." So you had like 20 years where there was no clear emperor, and that was pretty bad because it was the emperor's job to guarantee for the safety on the roads, to make sure that like the squabbles between the nobles that wasn't turning into bigger disputes, into bigger feuds, into bigger wars. So that with that more central power gone, you had a time where, especially in the area where the game is set, you had nobles that basically turned into robbers, into brigands. So we think there is a lot of material for a lot of different paths that you can go as a player when you're set into that period, because there are just a lot of ways
so
you
you
can
could
go.
do like a chaotic evil playthrough and sweet and be kind of a villain.
exactly.
No.
Sweet.
Yeah. I killed the people at the Grove in Baldur's Gate. I'm just.
I mean, within limit. So, I mean, you definitely have to be careful that you don't basically piss off everybody, because that's going to come back at you. But, if so that's kind of part of the gameplay that we want in, that you kind of have to play your cards right. You can piss off a lot of people, but just not everybody. You kind of need to have some of the bigger boys on the block to have your back, kind of.
So, what as we start to wrap up, what can we do? We talk so much about the fighting because let's face it, that's always the coolest part of the game. But for those weird people who like other things that are not bashing someone on the head, what are they going to do in the game? Like what else are they going to do other than just heathens, right? Heathens.
Yeah, so maybe to get back to the Bannerlord question there that we also touched on earlier. So I think we are kind of in this general genre I would kind of call mercenary sims. So recently we also, I think fortunately, saw more games doing that. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of or played Battle Brothers. That is.
I've heard of it. I never played it.
It's kind of like a roguelike, where you have your band of mercenaries with turn-based combat, but basically you roam around and you kind of have your mercenary outfit that you have to see through the missions that you're doing. You of course recruit new members. There's permadeath when your guys die; they die. Get better gear for them, take on more dangerous contracts. This is a type of gameplay, very roughly speaking, what you will be doing mechanically. But what is important for us is that, like I also said, that basically you never leave the perspective of the player. So it definitely also has strong RPG aspects to it, where of course you also improve your player character. You're standing in the world, which are some more diplomatic or strategic considerations. Who you want to get on the good side with, maybe turn down some more lucrative offers if that would mean pissing off someone you want to remain on the good side of. that type of thing. And something that we're also really shooting for is just having an immersive historical medieval world that you will be traveling through, that you will be exploring, which is going to be, I would say, semi-open world, where you have locations that are kind of linked, so you will not like travel all the dozens of kilometers that are actually between them, but basically you go from one proper place to the next, as a player. So things remain interesting, but we don't have to fill like every 300 meters with some random piece of loot or some random encounter, which will play a role. There will be random encounters. But yeah, basically we don't have to create this huge open world and fill it with interesting stuff, because that's not something we're able to do. Maybe a bit like Stalker, if you played that with this kind of like...
play to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So huge content-filled worlds are not something we can do. That would not be like a strength of ours. So yeah, we're trying to
I think sometimes all that stuff is why a lot of indie games don't ever make it into existence, the massive scope.
Yeah, and that's something you have to be very careful about, and really constantly have to keep on the back of your head, especially when you get super enthusiastic people asking on the Discord, hey, can we have this cool stuff and that cool stuff and that cool stuff? And
you're just like, yeah, and all of a sudden 50 things later, you're like, oh.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, we have to say, yeah, we would really love that. That is really cool. But it's like we call it the maybe list. So we would like it if we do get around to it, if we do have the capacities, but it is not the core gameplay. So I mean, just today we had like a question: will you have smiths where you can commission custom weapons, like with custom stats, kind of like customize it? It would be cool. We can kind of do it already with the tech that we have, but we would have to invest still some time into it to make it like a proper feature. So it's a maybe.
So I forgot the answer. Are you guys looking to grow past 2 or no?
Well, yes, once the funding allows it, but so far we're basically on a shoestring budget where we just managed to pay rent and food for the two of us, but we're definitely looking to improve our funding situation, whether that is through a publisher or through an investor. So that's something we do want to do, because we can just do a lot more cool things with more people on board.
When do you think people will be able to get their hands on, say, like a tech demo or some sort of form of the game?
So one of our main goals for this year is a demo. And I think, especially as far as the combat is concerned, we aren't even that far off. We're quite far in that regard. But for the demo, we definitely also want a nice chunk of campaign gameplay in, so we don't give off the impression that's just fighting. I know, blasphemy, but
what else is there to like?
Hey, look, if people can put out that Mobius demo, anyone can put out a demo. That Mobius demo has one weapon, no models, no textures, doesn't even have the game mode. It works, I promise.
I mean, look.
Yeah.
I think I would be interested in just a tech demo of the combat, but
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's of course also like different levels of demos that we're shooting for, as well as as far as how open will we make those demos. And I think what I mentioned with some chunk of campaign gameplay being there, that is definitely the type of demo that would be publicly available on Steam. So
that sounds and where is the best place for people to go to support the game and get information from you guys about developments?
On our Discord, on the Kinstrife Discord. I think you can find the link on YouTube.
Yes, I'm going to put the link down below, so it's going to be no problem there.
Perfect.
We'll pin it up for you guys.
That's awesome. All
right. Yeah. No, and unless you guys have anything else to ask, I think we're about at our time here.
I have a Q&A question from the chat. Reapith from my chat says, Examina lets you wrestle enemies to the ground with their physics-based combat. Will that be a thing in Kinstrife? And can you fight unarmed as well?
You can fight unarmed, definitely. You can throw down opponents. So Yeah, you can do that actually. Yeah, it's kind of actually especially interesting when you have like a two-handed weapon and you're kind of like too close to really strike, but depending on, you know, how you're positioned, maybe if your opponent is kind of, you know, stepping and kind of like unbalanced, you can totally like shove them over and push them over.
Cool.
I don't have a question. I just wish you two the best of luck. Your 5 years of work will not let you down.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, we're
so.
super excited, and you know we loved getting you guys on. It's always refreshing to get new developers on to talk just gaming. You know, it's crazy in your actual real life. You don't run into too many people who want to talk about games, especially medieval ones. But
Yeah.
no, we really appreciate it, and you know we wish as much success as possible to the game. We're all excited to try it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I had a blast here, and I mean, I could tell from the questions, you know, just how much you know, love you have for games like this. That was really awesome. Like I said, you know, not many people you can talk to games like this on such a level and in this depth. And yeah, I mean, definitely also enjoyed the videos you have been making out, seeing it like that, and the way also you described the game. Now, that was really awesome to watch. Yeah,
Good. I'm glad.
I'm honest here. Yeah.
Good. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll be back at some point in the next few weeks.
For sure.
Alrighty, thank you guys.